The Iran war's impact on oil is causing more friction between the U.S. and its allies. As the U.S. responds to rising prices by lifting sanctions on Russian oil that's stranded at sea. At a conference today, the leaders of Canada, Norway, and Germany all opposed the month-long U.S. move, and the German chancellor said G7 leaders spoke about the idea days ago.
6 out of 7 were clearly the opinion that we should not release the sanctions against Russia. We were a little bit surprised that we heard this morning that the American government decided differently. This is definitely not our view.
After oil prices surged and then dropped, on Wednesday, the International Energy Agency said its countries would release the highest ever volume of reserve oil, 400 million barrels. But since then, the roller coaster has continued, with the benchmark jumping back above $100 per barrel. So just how big of an oil shock could the world be facing? Energy analyst Neil Atkinson was head of the Oil Industry and Markets Division at the International Energy Agency. Mr. Atkinson, welcome to the show. You've seen your fair share of oil shocks in the past. How would you describe the size and the gravity of the oil disruption we're seeing during this war?
We have never seen anything like this. There is nothing to compare it to. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz is in many respects the oil analyst's worst nightmare, and it's a nightmare that's come true.
Now, help me understand, why has the IEA's announcement of this record release of emergency oil reserves failed to stabilize the price of oil? It feels like it did nothing.
Well, it's a little bit unfair to criticize the IEA here. What the IEA does in these circumstances, when there is a major geopolitical event which threatens the security of oil supply, the IEA, working with its member governments, looks at the underlying state of the oil market, the supply numbers, the demand numbers, the levels of stocks that are being held, and then makes an assessment as to whether the level of disruption is so great that member countries should work together to release the emergency stocks that they are obliged to hold. Now, the IEA has done that. Now, the 400 million barrels, which is the countries have agreed to withdraw now, that is a record number that is massively more than we have ever seen before. The problem is this, is that the extent of the shutdown from the Strait of Hormuz is so great that even the 400 million barrels doesn't get close to offsetting it. And there's 15 million barrels a day of oil, of crude oil, comes through the Strait of Hormuz every single day. If the IEA's stock draw were to be implemented smoothly over the next couple of months or so, and that's a big if, that would amount to about 6.5 million barrels a day. So what we're saying here is what the IEA has done, or the IEA's member countries have done, is very good, and they deserve credit for organizing this, but it cannot come close to making up for the loss of barrels through the Strait of Hormuz.
So now the U.S. is, in another effort to try and deal with this situation, the U.S. is waiving its sanctions on other countries that are buying Russian oil for a month, as long as that oil is already at sea now. Could that, or how much could that help with oil prices?
Well, according to the estimates by maritime analysts, at the time this war started, the Russians had about 140 million barrels of oil sitting on sanctioned ships, sanctioned oil sitting on sanctioned ships, oil that had nowhere to go. It was looking to go to Asia if the Russians were going to be able to offload it. But now India has been given permission, and other countries given permission, to buy the oil from Russia if they wish to do so. And the point here is that they will buy it from Russia. Russia isn't going to give it away or be forced to give it away. So India, quite understandably, because it receives 2.5 million barrels a day of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, is looking to try to plug some of that gap from Russia. And to some extent that will work. I mean, maybe 1.5 million barrels a day, nobody can be really sure, could be released from the Russian ships. We'll have to wait and see. But the effort that is being made to plug this gap from the Strait of Hormuz, the Russian or the easing of sanctions against Russia is a part of the effort, but it's only a small part, and by itself it won't do that much. What it will do, of course, is give more dollars, maybe several billions of dollars, to Russia, which directly or indirectly it will use in its war against Ukraine.
Yes. Now, we've talked a lot about the Strait of Hormuz. That is the central to this issue. Iran's military has warned, I think just on Wednesday, that the world should prepare for prices of $200 US a barrel. How high do you think the price could realistically go?
Oh, well, that's educated guesswork, and I would imagine on the part of Iran, it's part of their effort to to cause alarm and cause economic damage everywhere around the world, because that is obviously their strategy here. Now, look, we don't know how high it could go, but an indication could be provided by what happened back in 2008, when the oil price did get to very nearly $150 a barrel. And that arose at a time when global oil demand in Asian countries was rising very fast. There was very little spare production capacity anywhere in the world. So even a moderate disruption to supply had an outsized impact on the oil price. So we had the price going up to $150. And that was $150 without a massive interruption to supply. So, we've seen examples amongst the trading community of some barrels of Middle Eastern crude that is able to reach the market has been purchased or optioned at prices close to $150 now. So, yeah, the sky's the limit is the phrase I used earlier this week. And there is no doubt that unless there is a resolution to the Strait of Hormuz issue soon, prices are far more likely to go up than they are to go down.
And if they stay elevated, what could that mean for the world economy?
Well, if oil costs more money, that is going to cost consumers in every country in the world more money, because the oil price is set globally. It's set as a result of the interactions of trade between countries and companies, and every country in the world uses oil. So we're already seeing examples in the United States in particular, where prices of gasoline at the pump are starting to rise. Examples include $8 a gallon in California. We're already starting to see in some parts of Europe rising prices at the pump. So consumers will have to pay more. There is no getting away from it. And then that raises the question of what actions consumer governments might take to try to offset the impact of higher prices. But of course, that comes at a cost.
Finally, I wanted to ask you about Trump's statement that if needed, U.S. ships could escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Is there any chance that that would make a difference if he actually follows through on that when it comes to stabilizing oil prices?
Well, it's a welcome initiative because it does something to ensure that there is a more regular flow of ships through the Gulf. The problem is it's highly unlikely the United States Navy is going to be able to escort enough ships to allow anything close to what is the normal level of shipments. 100 ships a day, give or take, passing through the strait in either direction. It's very, very difficult to see unless the United States is able to deploy overwhelming naval force in the area, in which case it might work. But that, I would imagine, is still several weeks away because there are not the number of ships close to the Strait of Hormuz as yet. We'll have to wait and see how that works.
Thank you very much for your time today, Neil Atkinson.